Hello, nice to see you all today. Sorry I'm a bit late. Got a bit tied up this morning in some hearings or talking to clients. As we've talked about over the last few weeks, education issues are on the surge because of the problems created by the stay-at-home order. Most importantly, what we're seeing is that parents don't have good indicators, and neither do the educators of baseline data. What that means is that there is no information that has been collected or data that's been collected to show the progress over the past educational period to indicate where the child is now. In order to create an effective and lawful IEP, it has to start with where the child is now, where the child has been, what has the progress been, and where's the child going to go. So if that isn't happening and we don't have any of those pieces, then the IEP isn't valid. What is happening in a lot of schools that I'm seeing most recently is that they are assembling the IEP team and they're doing an IEP looking forward to the fall, assuming that they'll be in brick and mortar school learning, and they're putting in there that this evaluation needs to be done, this evaluation needs to be done, and this evaluation needs to be done for some parts of the IEP, but for others, they're just using old data, and that's not valid, and it doesn't create the free and appropriate public education that is guaranteed to every student in the United States, regardless of disabilities. So with that being said, today I want to focus on this notion of reviewing and revising the IEPs. And in days to come, we're going to do an even deeper dive into what is a measurable goal than we did in our last session last week about measurable goals, because you can't have appropriate measurable goals if you don't have the baseline data. So today, as I said, we're going to talk about problems that can trigger a meeting and should trigger a meeting, and then what to do if no one is acting on your request for a meeting, and who needs to be notified, and timelines and things like that. So first of all, when would you review and revise an IEP? According to the IDEA, it has to be reviewed and revised at least one time per year. It doesn't specify if that's a school year or a calendar year. Most IEPs that I'm involved with go by a calendar year, and most students' IEP date is when it's reviewed is usually in the fall. So, if your usual IEP date is like the first week of September, then that's when it usually continues to be until you move up to like from elementary school to middle school to high school, when there's a transition in effect. So at least once a year. During the meeting, the IEP team members, which you are included in, so is your child, and so is anyone else that you believe has knowledge about how your child learns or how your child needs to be taught, anyone who can interpret the evaluation data, all of those people can be assembled as long as there's notice that of who's going to be there is given to the district and the rest of the team. And so basically, the team will review the child's strengths, the results of any recent evaluations, the child's academic, developmental, and functional needs, and your concern, parents, about enhancing your child's education. And this is especially important right now because, as I said, kids were not evaluated during the distance learning period. Many kids were given resources during the distance learning period that they couldn't access the education from. For example, a student who cannot write. If the lessons that they are being asked to do are all writing tasks, it doesn't matter how well the information is presented to them. If to complete it and for their progress to be monitored, they have to write it and they can't write, then that wasn't appropriate. And we can't use that as an indicator of where that child is now. Anyone can ask for an IEP to be reviewed and revised. That's part of the team, and including the child. If you're, you need to check in with your child. You need to say like, hey, I know we put that special pen, the recording pen, on the special paper, the note-taking paper in your, geography class. How's that working out for you? And either they're going to say, it's working great, and, look, Mom, I can put the pen right here, and it fills in, tells me what the lesson was, and I can fill in my notes. Or they're going to say, it goes too fast for me. It takes me too long even to revise my notes with the recording. So you also want to be prepared as to what accommodations and supports your child is getting, or what modifications have been made to the curriculum, so that when you go to revise the IEP, you can address what wasn't working. If it's not working, they're not going to progress. They're not going to meet their measurable goals. So it's kind of a snowball effect. If one part isn't tweaked correctly, then the rest kind of falls down. So that's why it's also important to make sure that we have updated evaluations. And just from a personal standpoint as a parent, if my child had an IEP and had evaluations only have to be done every 3 years. But if they weren't on track before distance learning based on what that evaluation recommended, and the data wasn't up to date before distance learning started, then it's imperative that that child is reevaluated. And I would assert to you that you don't have to wait till the IEP meeting to put this in place and to get this moving. I would think that most parents would want their child to have those evaluations completed before the IEP meeting, so that at the IEP meeting, they can be discussed and interpreted and evaluated by those experts at the meeting, and then the proper access modules can be put in place. The right supports, the right accommodations. It's also important that every time the IEP is revised, or every time there's any modification to the curriculum for your child, those updates need to be given to every every teacher your child sees throughout the day. And that would be great if we could, if that would just automatically happen. But as a parent, and we've discussed this before, we want to be very deferential to the educators because they're the educators and this is school, but you can't. I highly recommend that if an IEP is updated in any way, that you send those updates directly to the teachers. Make them aware of what's coming, what's expected, what the struggles are, and get suggestions from the teachers as to what they're seeing. You're not going to have every single teacher in the IEP meeting that sees your child learn throughout the day. So it would be very important to have input from those other teachers that may not be participating in the meeting. Of course, you can request for any specific teacher to be there, or all of them to be there. And as long as you do it in writing ahead of time, then they should accommodate that request for those teachers to be at the meeting. You can also request for a parapro to be there who works regularly with your child during the day. So anyone who has information about how your child learns is appropriate input to be at the meeting. as a courtesy to the district, if you are going to ask for every single teacher to be there, please, for the benefit of all of the other children, request that they're there one at a time, and that as soon as they do their piece, they can return to the classroom. It's really, really disruptive to have, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 teachers all in an IEP meeting at one time. The requirement by the law is that there's one general education teacher and one special education teacher as part of the team. So, again, if you're going to make those special requests, make sure you request them. Make sure it's in writing. If it's not in writing, it never happened. So now, so basically, the big triggers for revisions, again, are the big one is that you don't have the baseline data. Any lack of expected progress towards an annual goal is another trigger. If there's information from any new evaluations, that's a trigger. If there's information or concerns that have been mentioned to you by another parent, by their children, or by any teachers, parapros, educators, therapists, anyone, that's another thing. The child's anticipated needs can also trigger a revision or an update or meeting. And then other matters is what the law says. So that's pretty broad, and really anything that concerns you, you should bring to the team's attention. Whether or not it's going to lead to a full-blown meeting, to an amendment, or to a modification, without a meeting, as long as everyone on the team is included and agrees, it can be done without a meeting. If you are making the request, you have to make it in writing. If you make it verbally and it doesn't happen, don't be surprised. And when the review IEP meeting occurs, it will be very similar to developing the annual IEP. Go through the sections one by one, say your concerns, talk about the progress, all of that. And it's really important to update the present level of academic achievement. And again, this is the problem with the distance learning that was provided to special education students in the spring. Also, functional performance has to be evaluated and has to be discussed and has to be included. And that information should be updated. I have a student that I work with who, while mom was the teacher, made really great strides, but not in any of the areas that were on the IEP. It was things that mom knew were deficits, and mom reached out and found her own resources. Some she got from the school and members of the team, and some she found on her own. And so that was very helpful to her to do that. And now she has brought that to the IEP team's attention for going forward next year. She wants it incorporated, and they disagree. So we're going to talk about that in a minute, what happens when they disagree. And we talked about it pretty much a little bit every day because it's the same answer. If the IEP team reviews and revises the IEP, again, they have to update the child's present levels, their functional performance, and they must let their teachers know about these updates. If the child isn't making progress and you ask for the meeting, the school cannot change the IEP without your consent. It cannot change the IEP after you request by just saying, no, it's not your day to have it reviewed. You have an absolute right to request the meeting, to request a review, and to have your child's IEP reviewed at any time. If there is something that your child is receiving services for example, speech and language. And all of a sudden, your child is no longer going to be receiving those services. You can ask for a request, or you can request in writing for a review of that decision by the team, and they will have to fully explain the basis for their decision, what data they reviewed to make their decision, why they feel that will promote the goals of that child's individual education, and why the needs have changed, that now that child doesn't need that anymore. And if they say, well, the child was failing X, so we're going to take away Y to give more time for X, that is not an appropriate way for those problems to be dealt with. Again, this is all about progress. We have to have baseline data. We have to monitor the progress. If there isn't progress being made, we have to reevaluate. That is the critical formula. You have to anticipate when the needs will change and why they will change. Perhaps you could take speech and language down to, 6 hours a month instead of 10 hours a month if the child has mastered or met this goal. But again, it all has to be based on where the child is right now. It's not arbitrary. It's not, we don't have the resources, we don't have the money. That is not a valid reason for a district to decline or modify or decrease services. So we're asked a lot if you can revise the IEP by agreement, and I touched on that a minute ago. And yes, you can. There is flexibility to amend an IEP in writing without a full IEP team meeting, but everyone needs to know about it and approve the changes or revisions before it becomes formally adopted into the IEP. And again, every teacher should be notified when those changes are made. It just as a courtesy to the district, I always found it helpful to notify all the teachers for, the people whose families I'm involved with, because the school has hundreds and hundreds of kids with IEPs. So think about the procedure that they have to go through to make sure that everybody knows about it. It's definitely going to be faster and better for your child if you go directly to the teacher. And they don't care. They'll welcome it with open arms, for sure. So if you do have a meeting to revise an IEP and it's not the annual IEP meeting, the whole team does not have to be there, and parents, you do not have to waive the absence of any of the people. Of course, it's always helpful to have input from all the people, but that is not required. If the school wants to amend the IEP without a meeting, you can ask for a meeting. You don't have to go along with that request, just like they don't really have to go along with your request. But it's much stronger. If you object, they really can't go forward without a meeting. And again, the request for the meeting, the agreements, the revisions, it all has to be in writing. Timelines. If you write a letter to request a meeting to review and revise the IEP, how long does the school have to schedule the meeting? Basically, there's no time limit in the IDEA. And because of that, we would hope that they would be reasonable and that, within a fairly short period of time, a few days to less than a month, that meeting would be convened. You should hand deliver as well as email your request for a meeting. When you hand deliver it, you should have the person accepting it sign something verifying that it was delivered. It can just be a simple piece of paper that says, on whatever date, I so-and-so, of, the, secretary of AJ Middle School received a request for an IEP meeting from students, parents, names, and then they just sign it, date it, and then you keep that receipt that you delivered the request. Timelines are a bit frustrating because, as I said, it's not in the law of when they have to convene this meeting. But certainly, if in your request, the more specific you are about what your concerns are, what you believe your child needs, why you believe the IEP isn't sufficient at this time, and what effect this is having on your child specifically, if you can say, we have a goal of this, there was the progress has not been made, and I know that because, and give reasons. Let's say the goal was to stack 6 blocks with 1 row of each color. And the child is now cannot match the colors together. So they've clearly gone backwards. If that is the case, then you want to write that specific example. You can include a video of your child trying to do it. You can include a photograph. You can have, the babysitter, or the other parent or a sibling, also write a statement about what they've observed. I have found in a lot of the families that I work with that the grandparents are able to get the grandchildren, students, to do more than often the parents can. So maybe that's the person who is really in touch with how the child learns, and that's the person whose information should also be put in the request. The more specific you are, the higher priority, just as a matter of practice, your request is going to be. And it's going to be harder for them to ignore because they can't say, well, we thought he was doing fine and so we didn't put you at the top of the pile. So you're really getting rid of the objection before it arises. So with that, we will finish for today. Tomorrow, we are not going to, I don't think we're going to go live tomorrow or on Thursday for a couple different reasons that I won't waste your time with. So I will definitely see you on Friday. And next week, we're going to talk about the IEP toolkit, which is just a way to organize and plan for your IEP meeting. I've created some worksheets that will be distributing upon request. We also have a new Facebook group that we started on our page for parents or students or anyone involved with different learners. We started it last week and we have 4 people so far. So it's going to be a great resource. So please join. I appreciate all of you, and I am happy to answer any of your questions or do a special session about any of your questions. I am here for you. So with that, I'm Lisa Kirsch Satawa. Thank you for joining me. Any questions, just call the firm or email me, and we'll give you our different approach for different learners. Have a great day. Bye.